Hi, everybody. I'm Jamie Tennant, a program director at 93.3 CFMU, and the host of a program called Get Lit, which focuses on books and literature. So it seemed logical for me to welcome today's guest. Paul Weinburg is here to talk about a book called Reclaiming Hamilton, Essays from the New Ambitious City. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you, Jamie. Good to see you again.
Good to see you as well. Not in person, of course, but in this new reality as we have going on. I'm going to start off being more personal. We'll get to the book, but tell us a little bit about yourself, Paul. You're the editor of this, and you're a writer as well. Tell us a bit about how you came to be part of this book world.
Okay, well, I around 2013, 2014, and new to the city. And I whenever I started getting some of the bloggers or activists, and then a friend of mine who's also a former Hamiltonian thought of starting a book about Hamilton, a collection of articles, but he couldn't really pursue it because he lives in Ottawa. So I ended up taking it over, and then two of us, Ryan McGreal of Raise the Hammer and Sean Selway, Tennant activist, we approached Noelle Allen at Wellsack and Wynn. And it was just to suss her out about the idea, not even put together a book proposal. And she said, yes, go ahead. So now we had to recruit the contributors. The theme is, politics, culture, historical. Hamilton is a buzz about Hamilton. Hamilton's considered a more cool place, exciting place, revitalization. All these words are used. The new Brooklyn. Some of these we disagree with. But anyway, you can read my essay in the beginning about that. The point is, we thought this was a time to have a book about a city that seemed to be getting out of sort of a period of depression, particularly the lower city, where all the contributors, I think, actually live. Although the book is about all of the city. So anyway, so we pulled this together over a 3-year period, and I try to have as wide variety of people as possible. For example, we have two historians, Nancy Boucher and Ken Cruikshank, deal with Hamilton's steel legacy through the story of a community that no longer exists in the industrial area, to Kevin McKay doing the Sky Dragon experiment, where a group of people bought a building in downtown Hamilton during a depressed period. The prices were low, and decided to do some different things with it, which included having groups meet there. They had a worker-owned coffee shop. They had homegrown Hamilton, which, but a lot of the problems that went with doing something like that, and Kevin is very open about that. So I'm just giving you a taste of it. Ryan McGreal talks about the struggle with the LRT, and we don't know if it's still going to happen, right? And that was a difficult moment for him to figure out how to end the article. So we had people like that. Jessica Rose, we talked about her before. She talks about nailing down some of the little projects people did to make this a more livable city. And as I say, we emphasize it's a work in progress. There's a lot of positive things happening, but there's also some challenges, whether it's the one-way streets or just a very strong car culture, which was my interest. I think you wanted to ask me about myself on the personal side. I kind of lost track of that a little bit. I'm a freelance journalist. I wrote a previous book that you interviewed me about, When Poverty Mattered. So I actually was working on both books at the same time, which is hard to imagine. But I think by the time I started working on Reclaiming Hamilton, actually was started first. The other thing, I had done the research previously, so it was a matter. So I was able to do both things. Not simultaneously, and this is what writers do. They multitask, they work on more than one thing at a time. Sometimes you can't get a hold of somebody, and maybe it's just complete insanity. But anyway, so now I'm just resting up after having worked on 2 books.
I was going to say, sometimes writers are working on 3 things in their head at once, but not writing a single word. That happens too, but what can you do? So you were newish to Hamilton when you think about it, when the idea came up.
Well, I found the city very exciting. It was, there was something, I don't know, it reminded me of Toronto in the early 70s, before, when you had a reform city council, reform in the old sense of the word, not the Reform Party, but urban reform. And so the city was a very exciting place in the 70s. We didn't have congestion. You could live inexpensively downtown. It did remind me a little bit of Toronto in that period. Just the possibilities are there and still there. So that's kind of made me interested in this project.
Mm-hmm. Now, when you came to the project, you said you immediately connected with some people who were activist-minded, like-minded people who were going to write. How did you source out the rest of the material? Because I don't have an exact count, but there's quite a number of essays in the book, and the topics are all over the place. We've got talking about immigration with Sarah Wayland. We talk about Carrie Leclerc's got her On the Fence article about reflecting on her years in Hamilton, Making Art in a White Town by Seema Narula. We cover a great necessary expanse of topics. How did you locate these people, find them? Did they come to you? Did you just sort of word of mouth find people?
I went to them. I just simply set up, I had coffee with people. I also started writing about the city, like for various publications as well. So I got to know some of the issues and some of the people quickly. I just became interested in the city. There's the Canadian Center for Policy Alternatives. They have a magazine. I wrote a bunch of pieces for them. I wrote a piece for the Toronto's Now magazine about Hamilton, and I kind of got involved in writing about the city. There's a magazine called Niagara Escarpment Views. I wrote a piece about the fact that the Niagara Escarpment was deforested for a long period of time, and people don't know that. And it became reforested in the early part of the 20th century. So I got involved and so when you get involved in writing and researching about the city, you meet people, you run into people. So that's how I did it. So.
Was it a smooth sailing sort of situation? How was it wrangling all these over a dozen different writers and getting their work together?
Yeah, no, it was a challenge. I can't, I don't want to mention any names, but some people I would approach and they turned me down. Others were interested in the beginning and then changed their minds. And then even the people, and we're all difficult. All writers are difficult. We all have egos. And my thing was awfully long, actually, because I got into the minutiae of the Red Hills Expressway,
right,
or Parkway debate, which went over 50 years. And I interviewed all the major players, and some people were just tired of talking about it. Actually, and they were burnt out, and so I approached them at that point in their lives, and that was it was fun. I mean, I had never done a collection before. I'd written a book on my own, and now I was organizing a collection, but also contributing to it. So I was researching while also calling people.
How important was balancing the content here? Because to me, it feels very well balanced. You've got the historical balance with the forward-looking elements of the essays. You've got things that are critical of the problems in Hamilton, things that celebrate Hamiltonians and what they've done. You've got really deep, intense pieces with a lot of factual information, and lighter pieces that, at least in terms of the reading, are more breezy, not necessarily the content. How important was that, and how hard was that to achieve?
Well, I think first of all, it was a balancing act, because you really have to make sure there's so many different aspects to the city, and just keeping on top of things. And I would ask the contributors themselves. I had them over a few times to my house, and we sit in the backyard or whatever, and I would brainstorm with them as well. So it wasn't, and then I think, and Noel, my publisher, was also suggesting people, and Ryan McGreal, well, he's very well connected at Raise the Hammer. He played a very pivotal role, actually. There was a group of people who played a pivotal role. Don McLean, I spoke to him, and Dave Couric, who ran Mixed Media. He was one of the first people I met in the city. In fact, I acknowledged Dave Couric and Don McLean. And my friend Stephen Dale from Hamilton, who grew up here, and he couldn't continue with the project, but he provided suggestions and advice. So I had various people that I relied on. It wasn't a totally solo effort. I mean, it can't be when you're working on something like this.
Was it, in the end, then what you came up with was this great mix of types of essays, of styles of writers? It's a real variety of things. Do you feel like, I mean, you could never talk about every issue, but do you feel that you succeeded in what you set out to do with the essays that you have in this collection?
Well, I think it's, it's a work in progress. There are issues that came up after we put it together that I wish we had tackled. Because this is the challenge. The city that you see in the book is the city that we thought about in 2014, 2015. Well, it's 2020, and there's new issues that are coming up, like the sewage spill or issue of racism and diverse, and not the diverse. Hamilton's grappling with the issue of diversity and problems with the police. We tried to deal with all these issues, but some of them we just couldn't do. We were dependent on who we could find to contribute at times too. I mean, as I said, we were turned down by people people are busy. A lot of the activists or bloggers or writers that we came to contact with are extremely busy people. And I have to say, we didn't, it's a big city, and I'm sure there are people we didn't know about, which we could have included. So it's a work in progress, and I anticipate that there'll be other collections down the road.
That's exactly where I was going to go. I was going to ask if you were thinking sequel already in terms of so many different things to discuss over the last few years.
Well, my publisher, Noel Allen at Walsall Wynne, has expressed interest in doing a sequel. There's nothing definite or anything like that, but I know she's interested. So, she's very excited by it, and we are selling, getting a buzz in social media. It's not easy to sell books, although apparently bookstores are doing very well during the pandemic. So people want to read. So it's doing well. It's in social media, but now we're trying to broaden our reach.
Absolutely. Oh, good. Well, I mean, every city is cities are not all that different, right? From one from the next. So, of course, the specifics here might not be of too much interest, but certainly the issues are.
Well, there is a piece about Hamilton that is specific to Hamilton, and that is, there are Hamiltonians say, "Oh, I wish this could have been a better city." I mean, Margaret Skimba gets into some of that. She struggles with the city. She is from Hamilton and struggles with it. She's a columnist for The Spectator. And so I do hear a lot about that, the old Hamilton versus the new Hamilton. So yes, there are, and not every city has those sort of, there are little civic cultures that are slightly different, and Hamilton is, a mid-sized Canadian city with some unique characters that might be different from Toronto, which is a bigger city, which it feels the center of the world and at center of the universe in Canada. Well, Hamilton looks upon Toronto with a little bit of suspicion because it's close by. Can't get its own hockey team because it's too close to Toronto and Buffalo. All these little resentments. And
Now, as someone who relocated here yourself, these essays drill down deep into issues and into stories. Was there something that you learned about Hamilton that was delightful or surprising or poor and surprising, or was there anything that came out of any of this that you were like, wow, I did not know that?
Well, the Red Hill Expressway issue, I didn't really know too much about. It's a very Hamilton-specific story. Every city has an expressway that people oppose and they try to fight over. It's not. It's a post-war kind of phenomenon. Hamilton went through it. I guess the sad thing I'm sympathetic to the people who fought it and lost, and I guess it's the geography of the city that excites me. It's just the natural surroundings of it, and I didn't really quite appreciate it. Of course, now people flock to Hamilton to go to the waterfalls, and it's become so I think I've lost thread of the question, but anyway, the geography is something that's that wow part of it, just experiencing that. So.
Absolutely. Now, you recently, it won't be recent by the time this airs probably, but mid-November-ish, had an online live stream launch for the book. Was that almost in a way part of the work in progress? Because obviously you had voices that were not involved originally in the book. You got some different people to come on board and have discussions. Is that the sort of thing that you're talking about in terms of just using this as a basis to engage further?
Well, that's the whole idea, that we see this book as not an end in itself, that it's an ongoing conversation. Since we invited people like Sarah Jama, who just emerged in the last few years, but she wasn't around when we started our book. So there are people like that. The city is just always changing. So that's why we use the word reclaiming, because it's an ongoing process, and we hope that it will spark discussion and more writing, because that happens. What happens in a mid-sized city is you don't have, within one newspaper town, there's no magazine, we don't have a weekly newspaper. The issues get lost. There's not enough outlets there's a few blogs. They're important, but people do those things for free. So I think sometimes things get missed in a mid-sized city, where a lot of writing gets done about Toronto or Vancouver or Montreal, because they're large cities, major cities, and there's all sorts of writers and publications and whatever. People are frequently writing about those places. Hamilton, because it's mid-sized, even though it has an incredible, complicated place and a fascinating history, we need more. There are not enough people writing about it on an ongoing basis, except voluntarily. So we wanted to sort of maybe get more people to write and think about the city.
Well, since things like Hamilton Magazine shut down, which I still regret because I worked there, this kind of thing is the sort of thing that hopefully will start to kind of take the place of those things. You're right. It's all on a volunteer basis, and it's difficult to sustain without a professional magazine or, paid reporters. It's a tough thing. So
yeah. Apparently before I was here, there was something called H Magazine.
Yes. That was Dave Couric.
Dave Couric, who's one, as I mentioned him before, but so so I think that's what the city needs. It needs, it's too dependent. I mean, I'm not putting down the Spectator, but one newspaper, it's a city of 500,000 people. It needs more voices, I think. We have CBC as well, but it's not a full station. We don't have our own morning show in Hamilton. So that's a lacking. A city of 500,000. I mean, there are cities in Western Canada with the same population have their own morning show, may have more than one newspaper. And I guess the issues were so close to Toronto that we're all listening to Metro Morning, right? So it's some of us do.
Or you could be listening to Morning File on 93.3 CFMU FM or at CFMU.ca. Had to plug ourselves there for a second. We are talking with Paul Weinburg. The book, I don't think it'll show up backwards, but that's okay. You can see that it's a beautiful cover, by the way. Reclaiming Hamilton. Essays from the New Ambitious City. We've been talking with editor and writer Paul Weinburg. Paul, thanks for being with us today at CFMU.
Nice talking to you, Jamie.